Going into the opening weekend of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker was certainly interesting. There was numbers ranging from a low 160 to a high 225. Now we have those weekend numbers and they tell us an interesting story when it comes to Star Wars. So of course, these numbers we're going to talk about are the weekend numbers that are not made official by the studio yet. That usually happens within, I would say, 48 hours after the actual weekend is over, but these are of course the analysts going out there and looking at the numbers and getting some, independent tracking out there because their outlet depends on those hits. So right now you guys can check it out in the description down below, and I'll also toss it up on the screen. But the early numbers for The Rise of Skywalker are in, and they're north of $190 million. Now, of course, this could always go about $1 million or $2 up or down by Tuesday when they're 100% made official, but 190 to 195 is optimistically where it's going to end up. And honestly, I think this was expected by many. If you look at the trend of Star Wars films, it's kind of gone that way, more or less, ever since it started. And this film in particular, having all sorts of things out there about it, its success or failures that are already being, displayed everywhere. The audience is talking about it, Rotten Tomatoes being more prominent, people that didn't like The Last Jedi, people that loved The Last Jedi, people that didn't even like Force Awakens that jumped out. There's a lot in here that brings to this score. And, just looking at it, 195 is by no means terrible. Disney predicted 160. So the fact they're way above their own estimates is good because they weren't misleading any of the investors or anybody that, like their job depends on this film, which is good. At the same time, with 190, it's going to be interesting to see how that carries over into the second weekend. And if the reception after the people that saw it and now hate it, is that going to carry over to the next one? And I think that's kind of where it's going to be really interesting to see what this franchise does and how does it retain over the next couple weeks. Because as we know, Frozen 2 is still out there and doing great. You have Jumanji 2, which opened up significantly less than the original, but again, it's still doing great. And, other films are coming out. There's a lot of buzz for a lot of things happening, with the quick turnaround now, like January releasing quite a few big films on home media. So, Hollywood, that window of making a big box office splash is really sinking. But, when they come to these types of numbers, I think this is good. You're probably looking at a pretty good domestic run for Star Wars here, at least in the United States. And then overseas, we're going to see how that goes. We already know China, that's a disaster within itself, so don't even bother checking that.